Caleb Rourke arrived in the small Arizona settlement on a warm afternoon, when the sun hung low and the desert looked like an endless sea of gold. He was a quiet man who didn't speak more than necessary. People in town said he kept to himself because of a rough past, but nobody really knew. He rode a strong chestnut horse, carried only a small number of belongings, and settled on an old ranch at the edge of town. The land was simple and needed work, but Caleb didn't mind. He had come here for peace, and the quiet open space felt like a deep breath after a long journey. Not far from his ranch lived Ayanna, a widowed Apache woman known throughout the valley for her calm strength. She was respected by her own community and noticed by settlers for the way she handled her land alone. Her husband had passed away a few years earlier, and since then she had taken care of everything with her own hands: her horses, her small garden, her home, and even the fences that stretched across the dry, dusty ground. She moved with a quiet confidence that made people pause. She had kind eyes, but they also carried a long history of hardship. Caleb first noticed her the morning after he arrived. She was guiding her horses toward the water trough between their properties. The horses walked peacefully, trusting her completely. Caleb stood on his porch, holding a cup of water, and simply watched. Ayanna looked up briefly, gave him a polite nod, and continued walking. Caleb nodded back, though his greeting came a few seconds late, because he had not expected her to look his way. Their first conversation was short. Caleb had been fixing a loose board in the fence when Ayanna approached to check if her horses had crossed into his side. She asked gently if he needed help. Caleb shook his head and said he had it handled. She thanked him for repairing the fence quickly and walked away. He noticed that she spoke carefully, as if she never wasted words. Her silence reminded him of himself. And for a moment, he felt a strange sense of comfort. Days passed, and the two neighbors often crossed paths. The shared water source between their ranches naturally brought them to the same place, in the cool mornings and quiet evenings. Sometimes Ayanna arrived first and gently brushed her horses while humming a soft tune from her people's tradition. Sometimes Caleb arrived earlier and stepped aside when she came, giving her space without making things awkward. They exchanged a few words, a simple greeting, a comment on the weather, or a shared observation about the restless wind in the valley. Even with these short interactions, Caleb found himself growing more aware of her presence. He noticed small things: the way she tied her braids, how she checked every horse with care, how her footsteps were quiet but firm. He admired her strength without knowing how to say it. He never wanted his admiration to seem disrespectful or misunderstood, so he kept most of his thoughts to himself. Ayanna, on the other hand, noticed the cowboy's quiet ways. She saw how he repaired his porch without any help, how he worked from sunrise until sunset without complaint, and how he treated his own horse with gentle hands. She appreciated his respectful silence and the fact that he never stared or made her feel uncomfortable. Still, she remained cautious. After all, she had learned over the years that not everyone understood her or her way of life. Some settlers kept their distance from Apache families. Some whispered behind her back because she lived alone. She did not let their opinions trouble her, but she stayed attentive. Chatter in town began soon after Caleb settled in. People always talked, especially when something new happened in a quiet place. They spoke softly when they saw Caleb and Ayanna at the well at the same time. They made comments when they saw the two walk their horses along the same dusty road. Some wondered if the quiet cowboy was interested in the widow. Others wondered if she trusted him. Most of these comments were just curiosity and harmless talk, but Ayanna heard enough to remind her that people often judged what they did not understand. Though Caleb did not hear most of the rumors, he sensed that Ayanna sometimes kept more distance than before, not out of coldness, but out of caution. He understood this, even if he didn't know the full story. He respected her space and never pushed conversation. He believed trust should grow slowly, like a seed that needed time, water, and patience. One evening, Caleb rode into town for supplies. The sun was already dipping behind the hills, and the sky was painted with purple and orange streaks. On his way back, he passed Ayanna's property and saw her struggling with a bag of feed that had fallen from her wagon. Without thinking, he stopped his horse, dismounted, and walked over. "Need a hand?" he asked. Ayanna looked at him, hesitant at first, but nodded. Together, they lifted the heavy bag and placed it back on her wagon. Caleb stepped back as soon as the task was done, not wanting to linger too long or make her feel uncomfortable. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Anytime," Caleb replied, touching the brim of his hat before walking back to his horse. Her eyes followed him for a moment. She was used to handling everything on her own, so accepting help always felt strange. But his offer had been simple, respectful, and without any hidden intent. It made her think about him more that night than she expected. Over the next few days, the weather began to shift. The winds grew stronger, carrying the scent of distant rain that never truly arrived. The land felt uneasy, as if waiting for something. Caleb noticed the tension in the air as he worked on repairing the roof of his barn. Ayanna felt it too. She checked her horses more often and tied down loose items around her property. During one of these windy evenings, the sky grew unusually dark. Ayanna stood outside watching the clouds gather. Concerned about the storm forming above the valley, she saw Caleb in the distance, checking his fences before the winds grew worse. For a moment their eyes met, and they exchanged a subtle nod, an unspoken acknowledgement that they were both preparing for whatever was coming. As the wind grew stronger, dust swirled between their properties, and the sky thundered quietly. Ayanna returned inside, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the coming storm was not just weather, it was something that would test the fragile understanding forming between her and the quiet cowboy. Caleb felt the same. Though he didn't know what the storm would bring, he sensed that this land had a way of pushing people into moments where they'd have to decide whether to stay distant or trust each other. He wasn't sure what would happen, but he knew one thing. He respected Ayanna deeply, and he hoped she knew he would never cause her harm or discomfort. In that uneasy quiet before the storm, the distance between their houses felt smaller than ever. The wind carried the scent of rain, the dust rose like ghosts, and the entire valley held its breath, waiting for a night that would change something between the cowboy and his widowed Apache neighbor, even if neither of them understood it yet. As the days passed, the sky over the valley changed slowly, almost as if nature was preparing everyone for something big. The wind grew louder each afternoon, blowing dust across the open fields and making the wooden fences creak. People in town spoke about storms coming from the mountains. Some said it would be rain. Others said it would be dust strong enough to hide the sun. No one truly knew, but everyone felt it in their bones. Ayanna sensed it the most. She had learned to read the weather since she was young. She could tell when the air became too dry, too heavy, or too restless. Her horses were uneasy as well. They pawed at the ground, lifted their heads more often, and twitched their ears at every sudden noise. She brushed them gently, whispering calming words, hoping the storm would not be too hard on them. Caleb also noticed the unusual change. He had lived in different parts of the West, and storms were not new to him. But this one felt different. The valley had a strange silence in the mornings, and a strange roar in the evenings. He fixed loose boards, tied down the toolshed door, and checked the roof twice. He didn't like being caught unprepared. One afternoon, while the wind whipped sand across the ground in thin swirling lines, Ayanna came to check her horses near the boundary between their lands. Caleb was already there, repairing a broken section of the fence that separated their properties. He worked with steady hands, hammering each nail with calm focus. Ayanna approached him slowly, shielding her face from the sharp wind. "The storm is close," she said quietly. Caleb looked up, his hair blowing wildly. "Feels like it," he replied. For a moment they stood there, watching the dark cloud mass forming far beyond the hills. Ayanna hugged her shawl closer around her shoulders. Caleb noticed the worry in her eyes but did not ask any questions. He didn't want to intrude. "You should bring your animals in early," she advised. "I will," Caleb said. "You too." She nodded, then turned to leave. But before she walked away completely, she paused. For a second, she seemed as if she wanted to say something more. But the wind grew stronger and pushed dust into their eyes. She simply lifted a hand in a brief wave and walked back toward her land. The next day, the storm finally came. It started with a sound like distant thunder. Caleb was in his barn, brushing his horse, when he heard the deep rumble. He stepped outside and saw the sky turning orange, then brown, then a frightening dark gray. A wall of dust rolled across the valley like a giant wave. The air smelled sharp and dry, and the wind roared louder than anything he had heard in months. He quickly closed the barn doors, secured the latches, and rushed toward his house. But halfway across the yard, he saw something that made him stop. Ayana's horses were running loose near the shared water trough. The strong wind had pushed open a weak section of her corral fence. Without thinking, Caleb ran toward them. The dust hit him hard, stinging his eyes and covering his skin. He could barely see the shapes of the animals, but he knew they would panic if left alone. He grabbed a coiled rope from the ground and guided the horses toward the safest direction, shouting over the wind even though his voice was almost lost. Then he saw Ayana running from her house, trying to reach the same frightened animals. The storm pushed against her, making every step difficult. Her braids whipped behind her like dark ribbons, and her shawl nearly tore off from the force of the wind. "Caleb!" she shouted, though her voice was muffled by the storm. He moved toward her, waving his hand so she could see him through the dust. Together, they managed to push the horses toward her barn. Caleb pulled hard on the rope, and Ayana guided the horses from the side, using her voice to calm them. When they finally reached the barn, they struggled to close the heavy doors because the wind kept forcing them open. Caleb put his weight against one door, and Ayana did the same with the other. After a long moment of effort, the doors finally shut with a loud thud. Inside the barn, everything felt dim and shaking. Dust seeped through the cracks. The horses snorted nervously, but Ayana quickly moved to check them, touching their necks and whispering softly. Caleb stood near the entrance, breathing hard. The storm outside howled like a wild beast, pounding against the barn walls. He glanced at Ayana, who was brushing the dust from her face. There was a seriousness in her expression, but also relief. "You came to help," she said, her voice still low but full of meaning. "I wasn't going to leave your horses out there," Caleb replied. Ayana looked at him for a long moment. She wasn't used to receiving help so quickly, so naturally. Many people in the valley still hesitated to get close to Apache families. But Caleb had not hesitated at all. The wind outside grew even louder, shaking the roof. Ayana lit a lantern and placed it between them. The warm glow softened the shadows. The barn felt safer, but the storm outside made it clear they would be stuck together for a while. Ayana sat on a wooden crate while Caleb leaned against a beam. For several minutes, neither spoke. They listened to the storm, to the rattling of dust against wood, to the soft shifting of the horses. Finally, Ayana broke the silence. "When the wind is this strong," she began, "it reminds me of old stories my grandmother used to tell. She said storms like this are warnings." "Warnings of what?" Caleb asked gently. "Changes," she said. "Good or bad," she never said. "Only that they make people face truths they ignore." Caleb nodded. "I think she might be right." Ayana looked at him carefully. "You're quiet, Caleb." "Quiet men often hide heavy thoughts." He hesitated. He rarely talked about his feelings, especially with someone he barely knew. But something about the storm, the darkness, the closeness of the moment, the calm in her voice made him want to speak. "I guess I keep things to myself," he admitted. "Less trouble that way." Ayana's eyes softened. "But silence can be its own trouble." Caleb looked down, thinking about her words. He could feel the weight of the wind outside, but her presence inside the barn felt warm and steady. Somehow, he felt like she understood him, without needing long explanations. Ayana then surprised him with a small smile. "You handled the horses well." "You handled them better," Caleb said with a slight grin. For the first time since he arrived in the valley, Caleb felt himself relax. The storm continued to rage, but inside the barn, a quiet understanding began to grow. Ayana reached for a dry blanket and offered it to him. "The night will be long," she said. "You should stay here until it passes. It's not safe to walk back." He accepted the blanket with a nod. "Thank you." As the hours passed, the storm outside roared. but neither of them felt alone anymore. The barn, lit by the single lantern, felt like a small world hidden away from danger. They talked in soft voices about their land, their work, their days. Nothing deep yet, just simple, honest words. Still, something shifted between them. Not love, not trust, not yet, but a rare comfort. A sense that they understood each other more than they realized. And when the storm finally began to soften, both of them knew that after this night, things between the cowboy and the Apache widow would never be quite the same. When the storm finally ended, the valley looked different, as if it had been washed clean and reshaped during the long night. The ground was covered in a soft layer of dust, and the sky was pale, almost shy after the wild darkness that had torn through the land. Caleb stepped outside Ayana's barn in the early morning light, stretching his tired muscles. He had barely slept. The storm had rattled the roof for hours, and the weight of the night's conversations kept turning in his mind. Ayana walked out behind him. She brushed dust from her clothes and looked toward the horizon, where the sun slowly rose. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried a quiet heaviness. Caleb couldn't explain. They both watched the light spread, warming the earth little by little. After a long silence, she said softly, "Thank you for staying. It would have been dangerous to go home." Caleb nodded. "I'm glad you were safe." Ayana gave him a small smile, gentle, almost shy, then turned to check on her horses. Caleb saddled his horse, tightening the straps carefully, taking a bit longer than usual. He wasn't sure why he lingered, but something about the night made him feel connected to her, and part of him didn't want the moment to end so quickly. Before leaving, he looked back at her. "If you need help fixing anything the storm damaged, let me know." She met his eyes and hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Caleb." He tipped his hat and rode away. The days that followed felt strangely quiet. The sky cleared, the wind softened, and the valley returned to its usual calm rhythm. But inside both Caleb and Ayana, something had shifted. The closeness from the storm night stayed with them in ways they didn't speak about. Caleb found himself thinking about Ayana more than before. He remembered the soft way she spoke to her horses, the stories she shared about storms and warnings, the way her lantern light made the barn feel safe. He respected her strength and admired her courage. But he also knew she carried grief from her past. He didn't want to disturb her peace by being too forward or assuming too much. So he stayed quiet, keeping their conversations friendly but brief. Ayana, on the other hand, felt an uncomfortable mixture of gratitude and confusion. She appreciated Caleb's help during the storm. His presence had made the night easier, but she also remembered how people in the valley talked. They were quick to make up stories, quick to judge anything they didn't understand. She had worked hard to keep her dignity and independence. The last thing she wanted was for anyone to think she depended on a stranger, especially a cowboy who barely knew her. Still, something about Caleb made her heart uneasy, not in a bad way, but in a way that made her question her own feelings. She wasn't ready for that. She wasn't sure she ever would be. And like all uncertain thoughts, they eventually found their way into the real world. It happened one quiet afternoon. Caleb noticed a small, carved wooden ornament near the boundary between their lands. The design looked delicate, shaped like a running horse with flowing lines carved into the wood. He had seen similar carvings hanging near Ayana's porch. Carefully, he picked it up, brushing dust from its surface. He knew it belonged to her. He walked to her house and knocked lightly on the frame of her open porch entrance. Ayana stepped outside, wiping her hands on a cloth. When she saw Caleb holding the wooden carving, her eyes widened slightly. "This fell near the fence," Caleb said, offering it to her. She took it slowly, her fingers brushing against his in a brief, gentle touch. "It was made by my late husband," she said, almost in a whisper. "I thought I lost it." Caleb nodded respectfully, understanding the importance of the object. "It's safe now," he said softly. For a moment, they both stood there in silence. The air between them felt different, heavier than before, but not uncomfortable. It was as if something unspoken waited to break the stillness. Then Ayana's expression shifted, her eyes lowered, her brow tightened slightly, and she took a small step back. Caleb noticed the change immediately but didn't know what caused it. She held the carving close to her chest and looked up at him. Her voice was calm but carried a deep seriousness. "Tell me something, Caleb," she said slowly. "Why do you come near my land so often? Why do you watch over my animals, help me with my barn, and stay close when you don't have to?" Caleb blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. I don't mean to bother you," he said. "I just try to be neighborly." Her next question hit him harder than he expected. "Cowboy, do you care only for what you see?" He stared at her, unsure what she meant. She continued before he could reply. "I know how people talk," she said. "They say a lonely widow should be careful. They say strangers always have reasons. And sometimes I worry that people think only of what I appear to be. A woman alone. A woman without a husband. A woman they believe needs rescuing or attention." Caleb felt a tightness in his chest. He realized she misunderstood his intentions. "Ayana, I never," but she raised a hand gently, stopping him. "I've lived long enough to know when someone's eyes linger too long," she said softly. "And I've learned to ask questions before things are misunderstood." Caleb felt heat rise in his face, not from embarrassment but from the fear that he had made her uncomfortable without meaning to. "Ayana," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I help you because I respect you. I admire the way you take care of your land. I respect your culture, your strength, and your independence. I don't look at you the way some other men might. I swear, I don't." She looked away, her fingers tightening around the wooden carving. Caleb stepped back, giving her space. He wished he could explain better, but he knew words were fragile. One wrong phrase could damage the trust she had slowly given him. Ayana exhaled softly, almost as if releasing a heavy thought. "Maybe I spoke without thinking," she said. "My past has made me quick to question." Caleb nodded. "You have every right to." Their eyes met again, and something gentle moved between them, an understanding, a shared realization that both had spoken from a place of fear and honesty. But still, the moment felt fragile. Ayana looked toward her house. "I should put this away," she murmured, lifting the wooden carving. Caleb nodded. "Of course." She walked inside slowly, not in anger or rejection, but in deep thought. Caleb watched her, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders. He didn't know if he had made things better or worse. He only knew he cared about her respect, and her question would stay with him for a long time. As he walked back toward his own ranch, the valley felt unusually quiet. The wind barely moved, and the sky was clear. But inside, Caleb, everything felt stormy. Her question echoed in his mind again and again. "Cowboy, do you care only for what you see?" He knew he didn't. He knew his feelings weren't shallow or disrespectful. But how could he prove that without crossing boundaries she had every right to protect? Ayana, from inside her home, watched Caleb walk away through a small window. She let out a soft sigh. She didn't regret asking the question she needed to know. But she hadn't expected the sadness she felt afterward. She whispered to herself, "Maybe he is different. Maybe I judged too quickly." But the valley remained silent, holding both their doubts and hopes in the wide open space between their homes, an invisible distance neither knew how to cross yet. The next few days passed quietly, almost too quietly. Caleb kept to his side of the land, working from sunrise until late afternoon. He fixed the storm-damaged shed roof, brushed his horse, and sorted through tools that had been scattered by the strong wind. But even while busy, his thoughts did not stay on his work for long. They kept drifting back to Ayana, her question, her expression, and the weight of her worry. He wondered if he should speak to her again, or if she needed time to think. He did not want to push or seem impatient. Respect mattered more to him than anything else. Still, the silence between them felt heavier than the storm clouds that had rolled through the valley. He missed the simple morning greetings, the small nods at the water trough, the quiet comfort of knowing she did not mind his presence. Ayana also felt the distance. She fed her horses every morning, but she now looked toward the boundary less often. She felt unsure. She knew Caleb's heart was kind. She knew he had not meant to disrespect her. But old fears did not vanish quickly. Years of being judged for her culture, years of carrying the memory of her late husband, and years of defending her independence had shaped her into someone careful with trust. Yet deep inside, she felt she had been too quick to question Caleb's intentions. She remembered the storm night, the effort he put into saving her horses, and the steady calm he brought into the barn. She remembered how he looked when she asked her difficult question, surprised, maybe hurt, but honest. His eyes had not held even a shade of disrespect. If anything, they held quiet sincerity. One afternoon, as she prepared herbal tea from a plant her grandmother had taught her to use, she looked out her window and saw Caleb repairing his corral. The rhythm of his hammer was slow and steady, echoing faintly across the land. Something stirred inside her, a gentle reminder that kindness should be answered with kindness. She placed 2 cups on her kitchen shelf and hesitated. Should she bring one to him? Would he accept it? Or would he think she was apologizing? But did it matter if he thought that? Perhaps an apology was needed. After several minutes of indecision, she prepared a cup of warm tea, wrapped a cloth around the handle to keep it steady, and stepped outside. The wind was soft that day, carrying the scent of dry earth and sunlight. As she walked, her heart beat faster, not out of fear but uncertainty. Caleb looked up when he heard footsteps. He paused, hammer in hand, surprised to see Ayanna approaching. Her expression was calm but serious. "I brought this for you," she said simply, offering him the cup. Caleb blinked, unsure at first, but accepted it carefully. "Thank you," he said. His voice was softer than usual. Ayanna nodded once, then looked toward the repaired fence. "It is holding well." Ayanna nodded. "It is holding well," he smiled slightly, trying to keep everything from falling apart again. They shared a small laugh, gentle and without tension. It was the first time they had laughed together since the storm. For a while, they stood in quiet, watching a group of birds circle above the valley. Then Ayanna spoke again, her voice slow, thoughtful. "I want to explain something," she said. "The question I asked you, I didn't mean to hurt you." Quote, Caleb lowered his eyes, turning the warm cup in his hands. "I know you weren't trying to." She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. "People have judged me before. Some think a woman alone must be waiting for someone to step in. Others think they can speak to me however they want. I learned to be careful." "You have every right to protect yourself," Caleb said sincerely. Ayanna looked at him, surprised by his understanding. "But you," she paused, "you have not treated me with disrespect. You help without asking anything in return. You speak kindly, and you keep your distance when you think I need it. I see that." Caleb felt a quiet relief settle inside him. "I help because I want to," he said gently. "Not because I expect something." Ayanna studied his face. The sunlight caught the edge of his jaw, making his tired eyes appear warmer. She realized then that she had not misread him. He was exactly the kind of person he seemed to be, quiet, steady, respectful. She looked at the cup in his hands. "That tea is made from a plant I use when the heart feels heavy." Caleb raised an eyebrow slightly, trying to understand. "Your heart feels heavy?" She smiled faintly. "Everyone's heart feels heavy sometimes. Even the hearts of quiet cowboys." He gave a small, surprised laugh. "Maybe so." When he finished the tea, he handed the cup back. Ayanna accepted it gently and hesitated. She wanted to say one more thing, something small but important. "Caleb," she said softly, "I do not want distance between us because of my fear." Caleb felt something warm in his chest. "I don't want distance either," he said, careful but honest. Their eyes met, not in awkwardness but in a deeper understanding than before. The air between them felt lighter now, as if the last pieces of the storm had finally drifted away. For the next few days, their interactions slowly returned to normal, not rushed, not forced, but natural. They greeted each other at the water trough again, They exchanged small comments about the weather and their animals. Caleb helped her fix a loose shutter on her porch. Ayanna brought him some herbs when one of his horses developed a small cut. But something was different. Something unspoken yet felt by both. Their conversations were longer. Their smiles were more open. The trust between them had grown stronger, though still careful. One evening, as the sky turned orange and pink, Caleb saw Ayanna sitting near her porch with a small woven basket beside her. She was mending a blanket, her hands moving steadily with practiced skill. He passed her property on his way back from town and paused, unsure if he should approach. Ayanna noticed him and lifted her head slightly. "You can come here," she said. He stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance from her porch. "That blanket was my husband's," she said, noticing his glance. The storm tore it in two places. "You're fixing it beautifully," Caleb said. Ayanna smiled. "It reminds me of him. But it also reminds me that even the strongest things can break and still be repaired." Caleb nodded slowly. He understood the meaning behind her words, and they settled deeply in his heart. Ayanna then pointed toward the open space between their ranches. "The valley looks peaceful again." "It does," he said. "Makes everything feel clearer." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Clarity is important. It helps the heart move without confusion." Caleb felt the weight of her words, not heavy, but meaningful. "Ayanna," he began, choosing his words with care. "I don't want you to think I expect anything from you. I don't want you to feel watched or crowded. I just enjoy being your neighbor and your friend." The word friend was simple, but it carried honesty. Ayanna's eyes softened. "I am glad you said that," she said. "Because I want the same." They shared a quiet moment as the sun dipped lower. The light painted the sky in warm colors, and the valley glowed softly. It was peaceful, calm, and comforting. Before Caleb left, Ayanna added one more thing, her voice gentle. "Storms bring warnings, yes. But they also bring truths. And sometimes, new beginnings." Caleb felt warmth spread through him. Maybe this storm brought one too. Ayanna nodded slowly, her eyes kind. Maybe it did. They exchanged a soft smile, calm, promising, and full of hope. Neither knew exactly what would come next, but both felt ready for the next step, whatever it might be. The valley slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm after the trouble with the bandits ended. The sun rose brighter, the mornings felt calmer, and people began to breathe without fear again. For many weeks, neighbors had lived in worry. But now the quiet wind brought a sense of relief. Life had not returned to normal immediately, but step by step, it began to feel familiar again. Ayanna's ranch, once disturbed by danger, now felt strong again. Caleb's quiet presence in the area added a sense of comfort not only for her, but for others as well. One early morning, when the sky still carried soft blue light, Caleb walked toward Ayanna's place with a few wooden planks on his shoulder. Her corral had been damaged during the raid, and although she had already repaired some parts, it still needed more work to be steady and safe for her horses. She stood by the fence, checking the posts, when she noticed him approaching. For a moment they simply looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. Their bond had changed after the dangerous days they had survived together. Caleb greeted her with a gentle smile, and she returned it with the kind of smile she had not shown in many months, calm, trusting, and grateful. Together they walked toward the broken section of the corral. Caleb set down the planks, rolled up his sleeves, and picked up a hammer. Ayanna held the rail steady as he secured it. Their movements matched naturally, as if they had rebuilt many fences together in their lives. The air between them was easy now, without tension or misunderstanding, and both of them felt it. As they worked, Ayanna's younger relatives played nearby, chasing each other around the yard. The children sometimes stopped to watch the two adults at work. They admired Caleb now, especially after he had helped rescue them from the bandits. Even the elders of Ayanna's community had grown to respect him more. Caleb had shown bravery, but more importantly, he had shown deep respect for their people. He did not act like a savior. He acted like a friend. Ayanna wiped dust from her hands and watched Caleb for a moment. She remembered the question she had asked him before, whether he cared only for what he saw. It had been born from hurt and fear, not from truth. She hesitated, wondering if she should bring it up again. As she handed him another rail, her voice finally came out, soft but clear. "Caleb," she said, "I want to speak about something I said before." He paused, holding the plank in his hands. He looked at her gently, waiting for her to continue. "I asked you a question that day," she said quietly. "A difficult question. I thought maybe you only saw me as someone alone, someone to fill a space in your life. Nothing more. I'm sorry if those words hurt you." Caleb placed the plank down slowly and turned to face her fully. "Ayanna," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "You had every right to ask. I understood why you felt that way." She looked surprised. "You did?" "I did," he said. "People talk. People assume things. You carry many responsibilities, and you've lived through losses I can't imagine. When someone lives with so much strength, they learn to be careful about who they trust." Ayanna looked down for a moment, touched by the kindness in his explanation. "Still," she said, "I judged your silence too quickly." He smiled a little. "I'm not good at speaking sometimes," he admitted. "I've lived alone for a long time. Words don't come easily to me." She nodded softly. "I understand that now." The air around them felt lighter after those words were spoken. It was as if a heavy curtain had been pulled away, letting in bright sunlight. They returned to their work, but there was a warmth between them that had not been there before. Every shared glance, every quiet moment, now carried a gentle meaning. As the day grew warmer, they took a break under the shade of a nearby tree. Ayanna handed Caleb a cup of cool water, and he thanked her with a grateful nod. They sat on the dry grass, watching the horses graze peacefully. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Caleb was the first to break it. "I never told you much about my past," he said. "Maybe it's time I did." Ayanna looked at him with interest, giving him her full attention. He spoke slowly, letting each word settle before the next. "I had a family once. My parents, my younger brother. They left this world many years ago. It happened suddenly. I wasn't ready for it. And for a long time, I blamed myself." She listened quietly, understanding the weight behind every sentence. "After that," he continued, "I moved from place to place. I did ranch work, cattle drives, anything that kept me moving. I thought if I stayed busy, I wouldn't feel the loss so strongly. But silence follows a man. It finds him no matter how far he rides." Ayanna placed her hand gently on the grass beside him, not touching his hand, but close enough that he felt her quiet support. "You weren't the reason for what happened," she said softly. "And you shouldn't carry guilt alone." He took a slow breath, as if her words freed something inside him. "I didn't know how to talk about these things," he said. "Not until now." She met his eyes with kindness. "You don't have to hide your pain here, not from me." The simple honesty of her words touched him deeply. It was rare for him to feel understood, and rarer still to feel safe. In the peaceful shade of that tree, he realized he had found something in Ayanna he had not found anywhere else. Someone who listened. Someone who saw him clearly. Someone who cared. Ayanna also felt a new sense of calm. The misunderstanding between them had been washed away, and now she saw the truth of who he really was. A man shaped by loss, strengthened by kindness, and guided by respect. After resting, they returned to the corral. Caleb lifted the final rail, while Ayanna hammered the last nail. The structure now stood stronger than before, a symbol of their shared efforts. The horses neighed softly, as if approving the new fence. When the work was done, they walked slowly toward the open field behind Ayanna's home. The sky above was painted with orange and gold, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the hills. The colors spread across the land like a quiet blessing. Ayana stopped and looked at the beautiful scene. My husband used to say, she murmured, that the sky speaks if you stand still long enough. Caleb smiled gently. What do you think it's saying now? She thought for a moment, then spoke softly. That storms can shake us, but they can also bring people together. He nodded slowly. I believe that too. The two of them stood there for a long time, side by side, not touching, not speaking, simply sharing the moment. Their connection had not been built on quick feelings or uncertain thoughts. It had grown through trust, through danger, through honesty, and through quiet moments such as this. The stories people whispered in the settlement slowly changed. No longer did they speak with suspicion. Instead, they spoke with respect about two neighbors who had faced danger together, helped each other, and found understanding in the middle of chaos. Their story was no longer about loneliness or assumptions. It was about strength, courage, and the gentle power of trust. As the last light of day touched the valley, Caleb looked at Ayana with calm eyes. I'm glad I came to this place, he said quietly. I didn't expect to find peace here. Or friendship. Ayana turned to him, her expression warm. Sometimes peace finds us when we stop running from it, she said. The wind moved softly around them, carrying the scent of the earth, the grass, and the endless open land. It felt like the beginning of something new, not rushed, not forced, but natural, steady, and true. Whatever the future held for them, they would face it with respect and understanding. Their story was one the valley would remember, not because it was filled with loud events, but because it was built on quiet courage, healing hearts, and two people who learned to trust beyond fear.